Welcome back, everybody, to this week's long-awaited episode of the Heavy Branches podcast. I'm Jacob, and I'm here with Cave and Tanner, two of my favorite co-hosts ever, and we are just so excited to be back with you guys. It's been a little bit of a break. Been real busy this summer. Tanner left the country once. He left the state a week later, and then we had family camp, and then I left the state. So we have been all over the place, not able to record, but we're all super excited to be back with you all here today. So Tanner, how you doing? It's been a while.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Two things. One, he altered his intro just slightly this time and said two of his favorite co-hosts ever. So he acts as though he's had other co-hosts at some point.
I have, but we can talk about that later. I actually have.
That's true. We both have. We recorded a podcast for school once with a third co-host.
I'm talking about something else too, but we'll talk about
that. And then technically you left the state for Hillsborough too, so you've left the state twice.
Yeah, I mentioned Hillsborough though. It was included.
Anyway, it's been good, crazy busy. The last episode we recorded was supposed to go out I think while we were at Hillsborough, and I'll admit I dropped the ball there and it didn't come out till a week after that, and then we got back and you indeed left the state and went. I don't even know where you were.
What a great friend you are, Tanner.
He was in Alabama.
He didn't even tell me he was leaving, so I don't know what. That is true. I didn't know you were gone until 3 days after you left for your trip.
We were in Orange Beach, Alabama.
Okay,
about 70 or 80 miles west of Destin.
So things have been good, busy. We just had VBS last week, which is cool. I've started I started a series of sermons through Lamentations, which I've really enjoyed preaching. I don't know if I've ever heard sermons from that before, so it's been kind of a different. It's very different because of the context of the book, but it's been enjoyable and I think encouraging, knowing we can always look to God, which is the main theme we're looking at through the book. So, Cabe, how you doing?
I'm doing really good. I've been trying to this whole time while you're talking. I was trying to think what I've been doing, and I'm sure it's a lot, but it's hard to remember back a couple weeks ago. I know we were at camp. And it's a camp we've never been to before because, we've been here for a year at Mount Carmel. So we went to a camp a couple weeks ago. This Sunday, the past Sunday, we celebrated the first year of being the preacher and moving up here to Ravenna, Kentucky. So that was really exciting. We celebrated that with some cobbler, which was a lot of fun. And I really appreciate the leaders of the church, doing that.
I can't believe it's already been a year, by the way. That's crazy.
So fast. It's been a good year, but there's just a lot that's happened in it. So, other than that, yeah, just, I'm preaching through the series in Romans, the second half of Romans. I did the first half a couple months ago. And so I really enjoy preaching through Romans. That's a lot of fun. I'm doing a series called What Does God Expect? Which I think is pretty cool. And yeah, everything's going good here. So what about you, Jacob? How about you?
Things have been going good. Like I said, we just got back from Orange Beach in Alabama. So we had 14 of us. So it was Sage. My sister Sage, she wasn't able to come with us because she had just started a new job and couldn't get the time off. But we had 4 for my family, 4 in an aunt and uncle's family, 4 in another aunt and uncle's family. So that's 4, 8, 12. Yeah. And then my grandparents on my dad's side.
No, nice.
Big family vacation, which when I was young, that same group would all go on vacation to the beach together. And as a lot of the kids have gotten older, it's been harder to kind of get all of us there at once. So it was good to almost everyone was there. Love you, Sage, but she wasn't there. She was the only one that couldn't come. So we almost had everybody, but no, it was good.
That's good. Well, yeah, we have had a few weeks where we haven't been able to record, but I'm thinking, at least as far as my schedule goes, things will be back to normal. for a while. But we'll see. Might have another thing come up at some point, but hopefully not. But we thank you guys for tuning in today. To kick things off, I have a little icebreaker for these two. I didn't ask. Do you guys want to just do this together, like as a team, or do you want it to be like a challenge?
Dude,
The setup guy. How you doing it?
I'll let you guys do it as a team this time.
we'll work together.
Yeah, have a little discussion.
All
But
right.
with the NFL season starting here soon, me and Jacob are Bengals fans. Jacob Simpson, and then Jacob Cabe somehow I still don't understand is a Packers fan, but that's a conversation for another day. But we're going to do you all have to decide if this quote that I gave you is a preacher or a NFL player. And these are all, faith-based quotes, but I'm just curious how easy it will be for you to decipher if it's a NFL player or a preacher. And I will admit I don't have the names for every single one of these quotes, but I do know that they are preachers quotes because they're under my quotes from preachers thing that
So
I've kept over the years.
do we get extra points if we name the preacher or the NFL player that said this?
Sure. I'll give you an extra point.
All right.
I don't know what means you win. I don't know what your winning point total is, but I think I'll probably do like 6 or 8 quotes. So
All right, let's do it.
here's your first one. Let's see.
Dun, 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 dun.
I'm gonna do.
What's the
Okay.
Jeopardy song?
Yeah. You can get through even the toughest of circumstances because God is on your side.
Oh goodness. I think Jacob. I think because it's so vague, Tanner wouldn't write it on his sermon list. So I'm going NFL player just from that.
All right, that's our guess then.
Okay, do you have a guess on who said it?
No idea.
Jalen Hurts.
All right, yeah, that was Tim Tebow.
That
Good
would have
guess.
been a good guess.
So you do get a point though, on whatever point scale we're using. So good work. Next one is unwavering faith, ultimate belief, depending on the Lord.
That's definitely a preacher.
I feel like I'd go football player there.
We'll split on this one. I'm going preacher.
You got to guess who
I don't have
for
any.
either of you?
No clue who it could be.
I'm gonna go give it to me again. I think I have an idea.
Unwavering faith, ultimate belief, depending on the Lord.
Yeah, I'm not giving an idea because you're laughing.
I'm going Jameis Winston. That's it.
Hey, no, don't give Winston. He's different. He got a different one.
Jacob Simpson is correct
Oh
on
my
both accounts.
Really? That was Jameis Winston?
Jameis Winston.
I think that was like last year, I think.
I think it was, which is why I knew you would get at least one of the football players like by name.
I think that was during the snow game they played in, actually.
It might have been or close to it. Okay. When I despair, God will sustain because God is here.
What football player says the word sustain?
Can you read it one more time?
When I despair, God will sustain because God is here.
I still think I'm going football player. And I think, for some reason, I think it's like a wide receiver. I'm going CD Lamb.
I'm with you. I trust you here.
That would be a preacher.
Oh man.
And I don't have who it was. I just know it was a preacher because it's on my list here.
Okay.
All right. Next, you are called on purpose, for purpose, and with purpose.
Preacher.
There's no way that's a football. That's not a preacher. Preacher.
Yeah, it is a preacher.
Who is it?
I don't have that one either.
Man.
There's several of these I don't have names for some reason. Let's see. Looking at my list here.
Dun 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 dun. I don't know.
You never know the impact you will have on another's life if you choose to follow Jesus.
I am a preacher, and I'm pretty sure that's Chris Ponchot.
Correct.
Hey, you're carrying. He's just proven, Tanner, that he's carrying in a couple months.
Yep. At the challenge.
Are we doing football preacher trivia?
Okay. If God is with me, who can be against me?
Oh, that's definitely going to be a football player.
I think I'm going preacher. I don't know who, but I'm going preacher on that one.
Football player.
So Jacob Simpson's going preacher, and you're going football player. That is Cam Newton.
Hey, I got one.
What if he was preaching a sermon when he said that?
I doubt it.
I don't know if he ever has, but I do know for a fact Tim Tebow has preached sermons before.
That's true. Is he a preacher, Tanner? So we both would have been right.
All right, here's another one. The comfort zone is a tempting place, but nothing ever grows there.
Oh,
I know that's a preacher, and I'm going to guess Craig Grushell.
I don't have the name for that one, but yes, it is a preacher.
I guess that because Dawson loves that quote, and I feel like he got it from him.
Yeah, probably. All right, last one. You ready? When you go against the grain, you're gonna get splinters.
Oh, that's a good quote for this.
I think that's why I'm pretty sure that's preacher, and I think it's your grandpa, Tanner.
Gabe?
I'm going with Jacob. His memories have been fantastic. My mind's
it was a preacher, but it was not my grandpa. Do you have a second guess?
No. Is it Jeff Fall?
Chris Weeks.
Oh.
When have you heard him preach?
I haven't. He said it in a class one time. So
okay.
It wasn't while he was preaching, but he is a preacher. So
that's pretty good.
I honestly just thought for sure you would have one of your grandpas in there, and we hadn't come across it yet. So
I do have some of his quotes on there, but I don't think any of them would have necessarily fit the game very well. So I avoided it. Let's just do one more Jameis Winston one for fun. Obviously, you won't guess it, but
no,
I like this one. I always knew my identity wasn't in football; it was always in Christ.
That's good.
It's a pretty solid one.
He also said at one point that my identity wasn't in football; it was as a football player. And then he said, "My identity is Christ." After that, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Well, maybe that's why they had the ... in the middle of that.
Yeah.
They just removed part of it.
Jameis Winston also frequently quotes Proverbs 21:31, which says, "The horse is prepared for battle, but victory comes from the Lord." He quotes that like at least 2 to 3 times a season, and it's hilarious.
You're right. He's a really funny dude to listen to. I do appreciate, when he's talking about his faith, but some of the ways he says things, you can't help but laugh.
I think he also got in trouble one time for stealing a bunch of crab legs from a restaurant.
What?
He's what you call has the best kind of CTE.
What does that even mean?
It means he's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, on that note, let's look at John chapter 6. We're continuing to go through.
What was the final score tally? Were you keeping score?
No, I wasn't. You all I think only missed like one. together.
Okay.
So
Well, that was fun. That was an interesting little icebreaker. Good job,
yeah,
Tanner.
I'm wondering how many people got them right. That's listening. So if you got them all right, raise your hand, and I'll know you're lying. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
John
Cave
6,
felt offended by that.
1
Um,
through 5.
yeah, John 6. We're continuing to go through John. And I'm gonna let Cave kick us off. He's running the show today. So
Wow. Sweet. Yeah, this is a really exciting chapter. So we're going through the first 25 verses. And so if we start the kind of the introducing to what's going on in the first 4 verses, let's just read that little section and then we'll jump off. It says, after these things, Jesus went away to the other side of Galilee. Then a large crowd followed him because they saw the signs he was performing in those that were sick. Then Jesus, he went up on a mountain and he sat there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was near. So we get this picture that Jesus was healing the sick. He was preaching to the people that were around him. And because of this, a crowd was following him. And so we have Jesus, his closest disciples, and then a crowd of people that was with him. And so he went up to a mountain and sat there with his disciples, and then they came to Passover. And then we see in verse 5 that he lifted his eyes and saw the large crowd. And then he was thinking, if we had this large crowd with us, well, they probably need to eat. And so this is the account of, if you don't guess by now, is the one we call the feeding of the 5,000. But as we look at these, there's actually 2 miracles found in these 25 verses. And before we look at exactly what happens, I want us to see that we kind of get distracted, I think, sometimes on like what actually happened. Because I think the details of, the feeding of the 5,000, having 2 loaves and 5 fish, a little boy having the food, or a small man, and then all the details of that's really awesome to see, or the walking on water, which we'll see starting in verse 15. We get caught up in those exciting things, but we got to know why this is here, because John, he records things to prove who Jesus was, and so these are here for a specific reason. And so we're going to see from the feeding of the 5,000 and from the walking on water that Jesus is the Son of God. He is Lord, that he does have power from the Father, and that these aren't just, acts of mercy. He didn't feed people just because they were hungry. He was showing something a little more than that. Tanner,
and
did
I
you?
think
Sorry,
yeah,
go.
and I think this has been a main theme of the book that we've talked about since we first introduced the book. We read later in the book that the purpose was so that John wrote so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And so, we're continuing on that theme in this section where again and again we see Jesus performing miracles. But I want to take a moment and look at verse 2 specifically, where it talks about that there's a large crowd following him because they were seeing the signs that he was doing. And he's just finished in the last chapter talking about all of these different testimonies that also point to the fact that he's the Son of God. And it's very clear that the signs were pointing to the fact that the message was true. And it's very clear that the message and the signs were very convincing for this large number of people, and they began to follow him. And I think the question that came to my mind was that a lot of times, well, we know even today that the gospel is very convincing. If it wasn't, then it wouldn't have convinced any of us that are Christians. It's we know it's true, but sometimes there are people that they come to know the gospel, they hear it, and it's convincing for them, but it's not so convincing that they're not willing to give up their life the way it currently is. So the question is, are the people willing to accept the terms or the cost of discipleship? We see later on in the Gospels that many of these people in these large crowds that were following Jesus weren't, because Jesus begins to explain some of these or some of the cost of discipleship, and a lot of people begin to leave because they don't understand, or they choose not to want to understand. Um, and we see that later on. So today, is that still true? Is it still true that that kind of thing happens, where people are convinced of the gospel, but they're unwilling to accept it because of what it could cost them?
I think we see that quite often. If every person that you could convince that the gospel was true, if every person would decide then to totally change their life and follow Christ instead, um, I think we'd have a lot more converts than we do right
Yeah.
now. Because I don't think what's difficult for people who actually take the time to study it, it's not extremely difficult to come to the conclusion that God really is the creator of the universe. I mean, when you really take the time to wade through it and to study it, the evidence is overwhelming. Same thing about the resurrection of Jesus. Same thing about the trustworthiness of Scripture. In the past, we've covered all three of those topics here in our apologetics series, and I'm not saying we laid out the best case. There's people that have gone through that a lot better than we have. My point is, when you really take the time to study throughout all of those things, it's not difficult to come to the conclusion God really is the creator. Jesus really is who he said he was. He really did rise from the dead, and the Bible really is God's word. But there are people that can come to that conclusion, but still decide, I want to live the way I want to live,
Yeah.
and I'll deal with the consequences later. I think we see that all the time.
I think you also got to think about why were they following Jesus? Like the crowd, there were some that saw a miracle and then they wanted to see another one, so they followed. Well, there were some that heard that there was a miracle worker, and so they're, oh, I want to see a miracle too, to see what he can do. There were some that were sick that wanted to be healed, but there are also just looky-loos, people who are just, we say curious, but they're just nosy. They want to know what's happening, and so they follow him. And so when like the rubber meets the road later in the gospel, you see when they're asked to actually do something, well, I can't do that. I'll watch you, but I'm not gonna, follow you. I just want to see what's going on. And I definitely think, like you said, Tanner, that happens a lot. Like we're good, like especially after the feeding of the 5,000, they're happy to get their bellies full. They're happy to do that. But when it comes to anything more of change, no. And I think that happens a lot in the church. Like we're happy when we're comfortable. We sit down in our pews when nothing, hard is asked of us. But when something difficult comes along, well, that's a little more difficult to do when it doesn't just come to the filling of my belly. And so I definitely think you're right, Tanner. That's a good thought here.
It reminds me of a sermon Derek Baker preached 2 years ago at the Spring Clinic on the cost of discipleship. Um, and one of his points was that we have to do a better job when we're talking to people about coming to Christ. That number one is not all about them, and that's a lot of times how people view Christianity, is they're in it to get what they can get out of it. But also the fact that following Jesus does come at a cost, and you do have to give things up to follow him. Um, and so a lot of times, we convert people, and we get them. Um, maybe we scare them into it by, scaring them with hell, or maybe uh, we sugarcoat things so much that they just think it's this uh, thing where there's no responsibility attached to it. But either way, it's like we convert people, and then they're surprised to know that there is a life of faith that's supposed to follow. And so I agree with Derek. We have to do a better job about that. Um, and on another note, we just listened to CJ preach at the at family camp, Hillsborough Family Camp, and one of the things he said was that true repentance always bears fruit. And so you're talking about how we see people in the church that, when the rubber meets the road, they don't want to get involved, they don't want to do anything. Well, I think that shows that there hasn't been true repentance in their life or a true change of mind, because they're still focused more on themselves than they are on serving the Lord. And that's, something that we have to help people understand is part of this life.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, like you were saying, Tanner, with the crowd, they were following him for all kinds of reasons. And what's so cool to me is that after he was done teaching and preaching and healing, whatever, Jesus could have done what I think I would have done, and maybe what you guys would have done. Get out of here. I'm done. I'm done speaking. I'm done preaching. Go do your own thing. And I think that's kind of what the disciples wanted to do, because Jesus asked them, well, let's feed them if they're here. And they said, well, what are you going to give them to eat? And Philip answered that the money they had, or they didn't have enough to feed everybody. And so one of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to them, there's a lad here. I like that. A lad. I think of like a weak little boy, but that's probably not it. It's probably a young man. He had some food with him that was given to him to eat while he was going to go hear Jesus preach. He had 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. And then they asked, what is this for so many people? That sounds like a meal for one person, because it was. And then Jesus, we all know the account. He took it, had everyone sit down. He broke it. He gave thanks for the meal that was given. And then he had them cast out. And it wasn't just everyone was filled. They were overfilled. And it was to the point they went and got baskets and they had extras. And so this miracle of Jesus was people were hungry. They were there listening to him preach. They were fed with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Not enough food fed more than enough people. And so that's the miracle on the surface. But like we alluded to at the beginning, why is this here? Okay, Jesus shows compassion. Awesome. Jesus loves the crowd. Also true. Jesus has control over the physical food and things that we cannot do. Oh, that's also true. And so I think I want to take a moment and look at that. Because when the crowd saw Jesus do this, they weren't thinking, oh man, how nice is he to give me a meal? They were thinking, how in the world did this man just feed me? We don't have to. I guess I will. There's a quote in the Old Testament, it talks about specifically in Psalms. I love studying Psalms because it teaches us about the character of God. And especially the Jewish people of the day, they would know how God was described. And one of the things God does, well, he's the creator, so he has control over the crops, over the food. And one of my verses I really like is a Psalm 107, looking at 36 through 38, describing God. It says, and he makes the hungry to dwell, so that they may establish an inhabited city. And he sows fields and plants vineyards, and he gathers a fruitful harvest. Also, he blesses them; they multiply greatly, and he does not let their cattle decrease. All right, and so the Old Testament tells us what? Well, God, he's in control of the crops. He's in control of the food. He's in control of the cattle. He's the one that increases and decreases. Well, what did Jesus do? Well, he shows he has power over food, the crops. If it's little, well, he makes it great. And so this doesn't just prove that Jesus has love and compassion on the crowd. It shows, well, he's the Son of God. And I think we see the proof of this in verse 14. Is because afterwards they didn't say, man, he's a good cook. Man, he loves us enough to feed us. This was a good meal. No, he had a good potluck. No, he said, truly, truly, the prophet who is come into the world. They knew that Jesus was more than just a good teacher. They prophets sent from God. And so I think it's really cool to see by the feeding the 5,000, we see the proof. Well, he is from God because God is the only one that increases the fields or decreases it um, in this case.
I think there's maybe also a throwaway statement here sometimes when we're just reading through this passage, and it's in verse 11 when it says that that Jesus had given thanks.
Yeah.
Um, and if we notice in the next section, down in verse 23, that's part of what the people had remembered, is that they ate bread after the Lord had given thanks. So that was something that they held on to. And as far as bearing fruit goes, what I would suggest from this is that if we want to bear fruit, we have to give thanks even when we think we don't have much. We should be giving thanks even when we don't think, when we're uncertain, or we don't know, or we don't think we have everything we need. We have to trust that God will provide. He always does. And we have to trust that even with a little, God can multiply things um, greatly. Um, we read passages like in First Thessalonians 5, 16 through 18. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, and in everything give thanks, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. And I think thankfulness is easily forgotten, especially in terms of thanking God. Maybe we say thank you to the waiter at the restaurant, or we say thank you when somebody helps us with a job or whatever, but maybe we forget to say thank you to God and really think about why we're thanking him and what we're thanking him for. But even with a little, we should still be thankful that we have anything. Even if, it's just a couple breaths of life, God's given us that. And if we trust him with it, he can use it for great things. I don't know how many people um, have used their last words to glorify God and to share the gospel. And because that was their last words, their family has turned their life around. And so that's just something to consider, is this giving thanks that Jesus did. And along with that, um, in verse 14, when they say, you know, this is truly the prophet who is to come into the world, it was clear that Jesus's life was a testimony, not just that he is the Son of God. That is super important and probably the main reason that this is in the scriptures. But something else to consider is that Jesus's life was a testimony of God's provision, because because he was looking to God and giving thanks. And so something to think about for all of us is our life a testimony of God's provision? Are we constantly giving thanks and glorifying God when he provides? And by that, people know your life is a testimony about what God is doing and does.
Because
Yes.
when you think about it, if your joy or your gratitude or your thankfulness comes and goes as your life circumstances change, that never was rooted in Christ or in God to begin with, was it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
No, that's great. And I never really noticed this before. I really like that you pointed out that later, that's what the crowd remembered. Like, I'm sure they remembered their bellies full, but they also remembered that he thanked God for what he did. That's really a cool detail there, man. One thing I think is really awesome is that a lot of times we see these things independently, especially like in children's church. And we'll taught as kids, Jesus fed the 5,000 and Jesus did this great miracle, but you never see it like back to back. And so, in verse 14 kind of connects the both. It says that Jesus, perceiving they were intending to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew by himself alone. So they had this big crowd, and he did this great thing for them. They were so excited that that this prophet, this man that was more than a teacher, was in front of them, that they tried to drag him and make him king. And so he kind of snuck off because he didn't need that to happen. It was the humility of Jesus. And so he went away. And that's when we get to the next account. While Jesus is on a mountain, probably praying to God and thanking him for everything that was happening, the disciples went down to the sea, got on a boat, and they crossed to Capernaum. But while they were there, the sea started stirring up, and we think of little waves. That probably wasn't the case. It probably was big waves crashing. They were fearful of what was happening. The winds were coming. Where they're at, they're kind of in like a bowl of the mountains, and so wind kind of comes in really fast. That's one thing that I never realized happens when you're in a mountainous place. When we first got here at Mount Carmel, we're kind of 3 miles up on top of a mountain, and the wind is crazy. Just because they kind of come up and it'll be out of nowhere. And so, like the first night we were up here, I was like, man, what is that? It sounded like someone was hitting the side of the house, and it was just the wind banging. And so that was kind of what was happening here. As the wind was coming down, they were fearful for their life. They had rowed about 3 or 4 miles away. But then they looked, and we know in another account that it says that they thought they saw a ghost because they were walking among. And when we think of that as a children's church, you think of Jesus is just gingerly walking on these calm seas. But that wasn't it. It was the waves were roaring, it was moving, it was turbulent. And then Jesus was walking there to them, and he was walking on the water. And he says, "It is I, do not be afraid." And then they receive him in the boat. And we know this is the details were given that Peter got out of the boat and then lost track and all that good stuff too. So when we think of this, just like the other miracle, Jesus walked on water. That's pretty awesome. Let Peter walk on water. That's great. He saved him when he lost track of Jesus. But again, there's something more that I believe that is happening there. This account here, specifically in John, is not listed here just to show that Jesus can walk on water. He's the only one that can do that out of the authority of the Father, and that's pretty awesome. I don't know about you guys. I've tried to walk on water. It doesn't work. I just sink, probably pretty fast. And but that's not why this is here. And so I want to think, when they think of who controls the seas, they knew that was God. Again, in Psalms, I think we see their description of what they would be thinking about when you say, well, the seas have calmed. Well, that's God who does that. Verse 7 of Psalm 65 says, who stills the roaring seas, the roaring of the waves, the turmoil of the people. And so after this, after Jesus calmed the storm, they weren't just thinking, oh, that's awesome, he walked on water. They're thinking, oh, well, this is God. This is the Son of God who is able to walk on water, because only God controls the sea. And so this is the second account in 20 verses that we see Jesus proving that he's the Son of God. That's a big thing that people talk about today on like social media. Like, Jesus never said he was God. He never said it. Well, God, in his word, and the way they understood it was he was the one that controlled the food. He's the one that controlled the field. He's the one that controlled the cattle, and he's the one that controlled the waves. Well, what does Jesus do? Well, he controls the food, the cattle, the field, and the waves. What was that proof? Well, he's the Son of God. And so it's very clear, if you read this in the right context, that Jesus is proving his lordship, meaning that they need to change their life and follow them because he is the Son of God, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's good. I think that points back to what we said was the theme verse for this book. And Tanner, I know you alluded to this earlier. I'll read it again. It's John 20, 30 and 31, which says, "Therefore, many other signs Jesus also performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name." And just to echo what Cade is saying, that's what all this is about. That's why Jesus walked on water. That's why Jesus fed the 5,000. The primary reason was for it to be a sign to prove that he is the Messiah.
And so that's important for us, but then we also have sign after sign after sign, and example after example after example, and testimony after testimony after testimony that we can show to people so that they can come to know the same thing that we have come to know and believe.
And while we're on this topic that you brought up, Tanner, of showing people how to believe and whatnot, I meant to bring this up earlier, but we kind of ran past it. So when we do these episodes, and anytime I'm really doing any devotional Bible reading or whatnot, I like to always read parallel accounts of whatever we're reading in the Gospels. And I wanted to point out something from Mark's account of this, of the feeding of the 5,000. And Cade, you might have briefly mentioned this idea earlier. But in Mark chapter 6, verse 34, it says, "When Jesus went ashore, he saw a large crowd, and he felt compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things." And that's the same account as we're here in John chapter 6. And I just want to point out the idea that when Jesus saw the crowds, he felt compassion for them. And then after he felt that compassion, he was motivated to do something, because it said he saw them as sheep without a shepherd. He didn't just see them as people that needed food. He saw them as needing guidance, needing teaching, having a need that needed to be met. And I think as we all think about how do we bear fruit in our own lives, how do we bear fruit in our own churches, the congregations we serve in, I think a lot of times ministry begins when we see people and we have compassion on them, and we see the needs that they have in life, whether it be the need for a fish sandwich or for something to eat, or maybe it's a greater need even than that, a spiritual need. But I think if we really be intentional and we try to see people, not just look past them, but to let our compassion for people with needs motivate us to serve them, I think that's where ministry really starts.
And that's sometimes the hardest part is a lot of times if you think of, oh yeah, I want to do the right thing. I want to show compassion. I want to love my neighbor, but it's like, well, how do I do that? And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's recognizing the need of others, because there's needs all around you. You just have to see it, recognize it, and then have compassion that leads you to do something.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times, especially if we're like in public, I don't know if you're like me, but I just like to myself, I got one task, one thing to do. That's all I'm worried about. If I'm pumping gas, I'm pumping gas. If I'm going to the grocery store, I'm getting groceries. But a lot of times, I think we overlook opportunities just because we get in our own heads, or at least I do. And so I really like that, Jacob.
And it's not even just right when we see people out in public, but when we're sitting in our room at night and laying in bed and we're just thinking about people that we know and that we love, family members, friends, people we have compassion for. The needs in their life that we see should drive us to serve them.
Yeah.
That's what it did for Jesus. I probably mentioned this on another episode somewhere before. I'm sure I have. But just a fun devotional thing to do as you go through the Gospels. Numerous times, I don't know how many, I haven't counted them up, but numerous times we read in the Gospels that Jesus saw someone or saw a group or a crowd of people, and the Bible always says Jesus saw them and he had compassion on them. And then right after it says he had compassion on them, then it says, and this is what Jesus did. And it's however he served them after he felt compassion for them. And I think that's something I need to be better at in my own personal spiritual life. When we feel compassion for people and we see the needs that they have, that should always be followed by an action that we do something to serve them to meet that need. Jesus never just felt compassion for someone, said, "Man, I feel bad. They really need some guidance, some teaching. They're like sheep without a shepherd. That's really what they need." But then Jesus just went on with his day and didn't do anything about it. Every time, to my count so far that I've read, Jesus felt compassion for a group of people in the Gospels. It's always followed up with how he served them. And I think that's something really important for us to take note of as we all strive to bear fruit in our own lives.
Yeah. I think something else to take note of from Jesus here in verse 15 is when they, knowing that they were going to try and take him and make him or force him to become king, he goes away, he withdraws from the crowd. And we know this, I mean, we see this throughout the Gospels, but here's another instance where it becomes clear that Jesus was not here to gain power. We know from several passages that Jesus actually gave up power, or his place in heaven, to come down to be among us. And so he gave all that up. And again, with our goal to bear fruit, if we hope to bear fruit, then our priority should never be power. And we've talked about the cost of discipleship and things like that throughout this already, but Jesus says, take up your cross daily. And that's not a that's not a call to take up some form of power. That's a call to give things up and lay down your life for the sake of serving him, or lay aside the priorities or the things of this world for the sake of serving him. And we have to consider the example Jesus set in that as well.
Absolutely.
The last thing I have, that I just find interesting more than anything, is we see from this whole account with Jesus walking on water. Cabe kind of talked about how we get taught things very separately um in like Sunday school as children and things, and never get maybe the full picture. And what I find interesting is at the beginning, or at verse 15, he withdraws, and then his disciples leave and go across the sea to go to Capernaum. And then Jesus walks on water. He joins them. They get to the other side to Capernaum, and then this large crowd is looking for him, knowing that he withdrew, knowing that he didn't get on the boat with his disciples. But then they go across, and Jesus is there. And what they say in verse 25 is, "Rabbi, when did you come here?" So even they recognize that something out of the ordinary happened. I mean, they don't know probably specifically that he walked on water and met up with his disciples, but it is really interesting that they recognize something odd happened here, and you never really get that picture, um,
I
or
know
at least I hadn't. So
I know I shouldn't have think like this, but the thing in my head is, like those videos of like someone coming behind, like, oh, you're there. That's what I think of. It's like, oh, Rabbi, how did you get here? Last time I saw you was on that side of the sea, and I just think that's funny. I think that's a good thought, Tanner.
but that's all I have from these first 25 verses. You guys have anything else?
No, I just think it's from these passages, I think we see just another instance that Jesus is Lord, that he proved his lordship, and that everyone there knew that he wasn't just a teacher. They knew that he was, something different.
Yeah. Well, that wraps up our John chapter 6 verse 1 through 25. We'll pick up in verse 26 next week, and maybe we'll go through the rest of the chapter. I don't know. We'll have to decide that. Um, I we have song of the week to do, and
I did How Great Thou Art last week, so it's one of you two.
well, it wasn't last week, but the last episode.
Last time, you know what I mean.
I was gonna suggest Fishes and Loaves because it's fitting, but we already have that on there, so can't do that one either. So if you have a suggestion, Cabe, go ahead, but I'll look real quick and see if I can find
So
one.
I've been listening to pretty much Josiah McQueen. Pretty much all. That's all I've been listening to. Is that his name?
It's just Queen.
Did I say McQueen?
He's not related to Lightning McQueen.
His mind's
Not
on.
related. Okay.
He must be looking at cars.
Not right now. I was right before the podcast.
There you go.
I'm trying to spell the song and I can't spell. I really like a lot of his songs. I really haven't found anything I disagree with. If I'm picking one, I'm picking Garden in Manhattan by Josiah Queen, not McQueen. Have you heard that one before, Tanner?
I don't think I have.
So the lyrics that I really like I like the whole chorus. He says it's the idea of being a light to the world, telling others about Christ. He says, I'll be a garden in Manhattan. I'll be a river when it's dry. When my friends can't find the road, I'll be the roadside welcome sign. Sunshine in Seattle, the cool breeze in July, the light in the darkness, or I'll be the garden in Manhattan. So that's the idea. You'll be whatever you need to be to show people about Jesus. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's added to Heavy Branches Song of the Week on Spotify. So
Other than when I'm listening to the playlist, I've never really listened to Josiah Queen. You guys both have been really loving him, though.
Yeah, he's a newer artist. He's only like 22 years old, but literally everything he's put out in the last, since the last year or two, I really like. And so we're trying not to make it just a Josiah playlist, but he'll probably be on there more as we go on.
Well, I'll try to remember that I'm up next week so that I can pick another Josiah Queen song. No, I'm just kidding.
There you go.
I'm just joking. Well, we thank you guys for joining in. Do you guys have any closing comments before we end things here?
I think, like you said earlier, we're going to try to be more consistent. So thank you guys for bearing with us. Hopefully we'll be back. What's the old TV show said that we'll see you the same time next week?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, summer's been crazy, but we're back to it. I'm sure many of you have had crazy summers as well. But we thank you for listening. If you're on one of the platforms where you can listen, or if you're watching on YouTube, we thank you for that. And as always, go bear fruit and so prove to be one of Jesus's disciples.